this show, we'll learn about the gravity geothermal envelope home, sustainable realty, and green architecture.
We're at Jill Karlin's home in Palm Beach, Florida today to learn about sustainable housing. How did you get into sustainable housing?
Lee and I fell madly in love and married, etc., etc. Now, Lee was an environmental architect who had been a professor at University of California, Berkeley, in the Graduate School of Design and Planning. He had invented a way to heat and cool houses without using fossil fuels back in the 70s. A small article appeared in the Hudson Home Builder Guide, and it was at supermarkets, sold at supermarkets, and Lee was away. He returned home. There were thousands of letters flooding his mailbox about how to build sustainable buildings. Lee was the master. What he had invented was what is called the gravity geothermal envelope. That was his invention, and he got the information from a tree. He had built his first passive solar home on property that his dad had left for him it was probably in the early 70s, 72, 73. It was a 10,000 square foot house. It had waterfalls, 14 levels, dark rooms, huge place in the middle of the boonies, in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. And he built this house, and he planned to stay there and ride out the storm because he was on the sustainable wagon back then. He had been very influenced by Buckminster Fuller, Frank Lloyd Wright, but mostly Fuller, and had built hundreds of homes before he built this passive solar home. And there was an ice storm, and the ice storm knocked out all the electricity for 2 weeks. And during this crippled condition, where there was no electricity, no heat in the home, Lee observed in his 10,000 square foot house with the 40-foot greenhouse that the bedrooms and all the rooms opened up into, he observed at the top level of the greenhouse that when he opened the doors from his bedroom, one morning very early, this whoosh of hot air hit him. And when that whoosh of hot air hit him, he realized that he had come upon something profound for humanity. He didn't know what, he didn't know how, but he knew he had to. He was a scientist, an inventor, a true genius, Einstein quality, and he realized he was going to set on the mission of figuring it out. So he lay under a tree, put his hands under his head at the pine tree, looked up at the tree, and said, "Why is it so easy for you and so difficult for mankind?" And so the answer came to him in a flash. He ran in the house, he got a piece of paper, and he drew out what would eventually be what's behind you. The gravity geothermal envelope is basically an envelope of air which envelops the entire home in a warm blanket of air. And why is that air warm? The reason that the air is warm is because the earth, which is here, stays a constant temperature below the frost line. So if you're in New York, that temperature may be 58 degrees or something. If you're in Libby, Montana, it may be 52 degrees. If you're in South Florida, it may be 60 degrees. What Lee says happens is that heat transfers here. That becomes warm air. Hot air rises and cold air falls. The hot air rises as the cold air falls, and it keeps a circulating an envelope of air around the house. Couple that with a greenhouse, and you've got yourself a warm building. And this can all be engineered, Lee figured, to site-specific. It can be engineered to where the home is. So in this era, Lee started his company, Ecosia Homes. How they came up with the name Ecosia is they wanted to name it something that was ecological. And at the time, they had a friend who was a Greek sculptor, and they came up with this name, Ecosia, and the Greek man told them that ekosia means the essence of being. And so Lee defined the essence of being as family, food, and shelter. And that's what his work provides. Lee has been, his whole life was dedicated to providing a safe place for families to live, a safe shelter that would provide all of your needs integrated into one in one spot. So the first book that he wrote was Ecosia Homes. This book describes the gravity geothermal envelope. And in this book is also a climatological map. So there's a map at the back of the book that shows where all of these homes are built, because these homes have been built all over the United States, and since the mid-70s, the late 70s and early 80s, these homes all over America, in Raleigh, North Carolina, in Aspen, in all of these places have had no utility bills for heating or cooling. Here's or very little ones. Here's the climatological zone map. Here's the map, and that is where all these homes are, as well as in Sweden, northern Canada, Norway. For example, this home in Lake Tahoe, with all the snow around it, has not had a utility bill for 30 years for heating or cooling. This, for Lee, was just the tip of the iceberg. Lee's commitment is to designing 100% self-sustaining architecture, building that takes nothing from the earth, air, or water, puts nothing into the earth, air, or water, and protects the lives of human beings no matter what the external conditions, earthquake, flood, fire, tsunami, nuclear, it doesn't matter. And that's what ecotecture is, which is what I'm committed to promoting in the future. I have a website, it's thedolphindream.com. I'm interested in getting ecotecture, the 100% self-sustaining way of living on the earth, in the hands of President Obama, because this is the way that it's going to change. We can change by making a program like the WPA or the CCC, or one of those are the Manhattan Project, a government-funded project that is devoted to building 100% sustainable buildings that take nothing, like I say, from the earth, air, or water, put nothing into the earth, air, or water, and provide tons of jobs for people in a sustainable industry.
Hey everybody, this is Todd V.
And Dave Kettlewell.
And this is another Pro
Con.
So Dave, really, I mean, the house design that we just looked at is a fairly genius sort of science imitates nature kind of design. Taking the geothermal effects of the earth and using that to cool the home without trying to cool and heat the home using any fossil fuels, it's a really awesome idea.
I would agree with that. The idea of using the geothermal heat, let's say at 56 or 52 degrees, the temperature of the earth 6 feet down, to assist in bringing up the temperature in the wintertime in the home and taking the temperature down in hot weather makes sense. The question I had is the modality. To create a shell around an entire house like that is a fairly expensive proposition. That would almost be like conduiting gas into your home by using, the entire width of the home in a thin 1-inch area to transfer it. I'm going to guess that the actual mechanism that will be used in the future is similar to what a heat pump is, where there's pipes that go into the ground, they come out of that ground, and that temperature then is pulled out and applied to the air. Interesting concept. I'm just not sure that exact modality is the way it's going to go.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be impacting the initial cost. But as they said, they had homes that were 20 years old that had zero heating and cooling bills in some of the extreme areas. So they're only test models, of course, at this point. But I think the concept is very sound, and it's trying to find a way that can be implemented on a very cost-effective basis.
The idea of using the geothermal temperature gradient to work with the home makes sense.
Dave's not even arguing at all. So I guess we both decided pro on that one.
He just wasn't hearing my arguments, but that's okay. I know you did.